Good morning, everybody. Well, good evening for those of you who are going to be tuning to this in Australia. And welcome back to the lab. Hope you guys have been enjoying the last string of interviews. I know the last few weeks for me has been an absolute blast being able to kind of talk with people from around the world, the UK, Australia, and I figure, we already had someone done in Australia. Why not go there again? So with me here today, I have Alan Obst from Australia. So thanks for joining me this morning or this evening, Alan.
No, very welcome. Thank you so much for having me.
So just to kind of give a little bit of background here on Alan, I actually met Alan at the University of Notre Dame when you had, I think, spontaneously gone to that conference, right? We had gone up to the sports medicine conference up in
Yep.
June in, was it 2022?
Yes, it would have been. Yeah.
Yeah, 2022. So
Yeah.
in June of 2022, I had the wonderful opportunity to share multiple Guinnesses with Alan.
Yep.
No, we had a good time. No, met up at Notre Dame, kind of got to talking about physical therapy, learned a little bit more about him, and found out that he was almost kind of an international physical therapist or physio therapist traveling with a tennis pro. So, Alan, if you wouldn't mind, give us a little bit of background, kind of, how you've become a physiotherapist, and then what you've done, with the tennis pro, and then what you do now.
Yeah. Thank you so much. So, I suppose to start with, I mean, back in the day, I think it was, man, like I'm 36 now. So 2008, 9, and 10, I was fortunate enough to play some professional Australian rules football myself as an athlete. So I always assumed once I finished playing, I was going to work as a physical therapist or a physiotherapist in Australian rules football. And sliding doors, opportunities. I got an opportunity to treat an international tennis player, which ended up being Victoria Azarenka, or Vika as she goes by. And the short story was that I ended up traveling the world with Vika, and we worked full time together for 18 months. So I kind of picked up, left everything in Australia. The funny the funny story was, and this is the world of sports physical therapy, I suppose you like, and particularly at that level. Um, Great job, great experience. The money's reasonable, or quite good, but they ask a lot. And the funny story was when I first started with Vika, it was 2 days after my wedding. So I'm still married, which is great. My beautiful wife, she's Jamie. She's very understanding. But yeah, so I just jumped on board, moved overseas, spent a lot of my time in Boca Raton in Florida, and right now the last 8 or 9 months, I think now, I've actually located back to Australia, residing in Melbourne, and working as a senior physiotherapist for Tennis Australia. So I've gone from the one individual player to more the organisation. So basically covering all the Australian pro players at the moment.
Holy smokes. That sounds like so much fun, I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah, I mean it's awesome. I mean, I should be in Paris right now, but yeah, I had a baby boy, my first child, 3.5 weeks ago. So just getting used to fatherhood at the moment. But I'll soon be traveling to England for Wimbledon. So that should be good fun.
Holy smokes, man. That's gonna be I'm very jealous right now. I'm not gonna
Yeah,
lie.
it's good fun. I'm very fortunate.
Wow. Now, Alan, you said Australian rules football. What other sports? I know when we were up in Notre Dame, you talked about cricket as well.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, good memory. I Before I was working in or in tennis with Victoria, I was
Mhm.
working in professional cricket back home. So obviously Americans might not be too familiar with cricket, but back in Australia, you got Australian rules football, which is I suppose
Mhm.
our equivalent of NFL.
Mhm.
It's local just to Australia, and then we've got cricket, which is they're the two biggest sports in Australia. So ironically, our two biggest sports are probably sports that a lot of your listeners might not have heard of, but that was great. So I played and I worked in like team sport environments, and then to get moved to well, not moved, I made the choice, but to end up in
Mhm.
tennis, definitely a very different landscape for sure. Even working now with an organisation like Tennis Australia,
Mhm.
you're still dealing with a heap of individual athletes. So it's
Mhm.
been an interesting transition to end up where I have.
Dude, that's awesome. So I have a lot of, man, Alan, I have so many questions for you right now. So when you
Ah,
first
shoot.
started, like, I know, sorry. When you first started working as like a physical therapist and you started working like internationally and you're traveling to all these different countries, um, how did you go about kind of like advancing your skills and kind of keeping up with best practice and kind of, I mean, if you're going to different countries, maybe you even got to see like how different physical therapists traveling with their
Mm,
pros, maybe
mm.
how they did things differently. So I guess just kind of starting, after your education was completed, how have you been able to kind of keep up with your skills as you kind of went international?
Yeah, very, very good question. When I was working in cricket before I got to the international stage, I went back to university or college, and I did my masters of sports physiotherapy. So just like a master's degree on top of the physio or physical therapy degree I had.
Hmm.
When I first got the job with Vika and started traveling, albeit it came with a lot of challenges, one of the things I did have was all of a sudden a lot of downtime for myself, particularly because my wife was in Australia. So quite literally, the first thing I did was I undertook another master's degree of high performance sport. So that was not necessarily purely physical therapy related, but all aspects of high performance sport. And I did that through ACU, as you know.
Yeah.
So that's what I did. So I've been a big believer in just continuing through study.
Hmm.
And one of the sayings I really love when it comes to life, let alone any kind of physical therapy work, is you know what you know and you know what you're good at.
Hmm.
You often know what you don't know, but then there's this massive gray area of you don't know what you don't know. Like
Yeah.
until you see something, you're like, shit, I haven't seen one of those for a while. And as you alluded to, when you work across everywhere around the world, you see some things and you're like, man, that's we haven't done that for 20 years in Australia. What is that rubbish? And you catch yourself going, actually, it might not be rubbish. Why do they do that? Because you
Hmm.
get European physios, they're different to physios from the United States, different to Australia. And all of a sudden, I just found myself being a little, fly in the corner of the room, just doing a lot of observation. And the tennis circuit's a very small world. I mean, you find yourself becoming relatively good friends with a lot of the other traveling physical therapists, and you start building really good relationships, and you don't do any structured professional development. But you have a lot of coffees, you have a lot of chats, and all of a sudden you start to just question, okay, why do I do things my way? Why do I think that's better than what you're doing? Yeah,
Hmm.
let's try what you're doing. And I just find just having that mindset of always wanting to improve, you just incidentally you do improve because you start questioning the status quo and what you can be doing differently.
See, Alan, I wish more therapists had your mindset in terms of like growth and just the openness to discussion. Because I feel like what I've kind of found now, especially like through social media, is there's a lot of like absolutists out there of it's their way of the highway in terms of treating, and it's their
Mm,
way of thinking only, and that's the only way athletes are ever going to get better. And for some
mm,
reason, the sports performance and sports medicine world is very combative when it comes to viewpoints and openness to discussion on certain things because there's more than one way to treat people, as you kind of come to find. Um,
yeah.
how did you go about landing your first like so obviously like you're in Australia, Russian tennis player, like how did
Mm.
that initially happen?
It's just funny, and this is I suppose a good story about sliding doors and taking your opportunities. So
Hmm.
I was in the sports and exercise board in Australia, and that was just a voluntary role, um,
Hmm.
organising professional development for younger physical therapists. And I got an email to say basically, look, there's a tennis player in town. We need someone to treat her,
Hmm.
and it could have been anyone. It could have been like a 16-year-old from Melbourne.
Hmm.
Anyway, I got a call to say, can you help out? And I said, look, I can. And this is the week I was getting married. I said, I can't treat her Saturday. I'm literally getting married, but happy to treat her during the week.
Hmm.
So I just raced over to treated her in a hotel room. Just a friend of a friend. Didn't ask for any money. And as it turned out, I was like, hey, this is Victoria Azarenka. This is pretty cool. I mean, she's a former world number one.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I suppose of not a reward, but it's really lucky for me that I took on that kind of job request.
Hmm.
um, and she was actually after a cervical manipulation,
Okay.
and it's not something I do routinely, to be honest.
Hmm.
But yeah, we ended up having a really good therapy session. She felt really good, and she just asked if I can come back and treat her again 2 days later. So I treated Vika twice. And yeah, the funny story was she asked to see me Saturday again because she had the semi final.
Hmm.
And I said, look, I can't. I'm getting married. I can't. I'm literally cannot see you Saturday.
So
And
important.
just this is probably one of those days. But she messaged me on the morning of my wedding.
Hmm.
She goes, "Can I call you?" And this is her, international tennis player's mindset. I said, "Look, I've got a few hours up my sleeve. Call away." And she said, "Look, I've actually just hurt my adductor. I'm going to pull out. I've got the Australian Open next week. I'm not going to risk it. Can I see you tomorrow?" And I said, "Look, you don't know where I am, but I'm in the Barossa. I'm an hour and a half away from the city. Look, I couldn't get back to Adelaide till at least 2. I've got the breakfast. I've got the cleanup." And she said, "I've got a flight at 12." I said, "Oh, I'm so, so sorry. I can't get back in time." And she actually called me back a minute later, and she said, "Boom, I've just changed my flight till 7. I'll see you at 2."
Huh.
And at this stage, I didn't say I will see you at 2. I just said like I can't possibly. So look, the morning after the wedding, kind of had the breakfast, cleaned up, raced back to the city, saw her a third time, and she had just finished with a physical therapist that she'd had for a number of years. And yeah, she asked me if I wanted to go to the Australian Open with her. So I just took a 2 weeks of annual leave from my current job in cricket.
Hmm.
Awesome experience, and yeah, the short of it is when we're all done, her coach, who's French, went back home to France. Her fitness trainer got COVID, so he was in a hotel room by himself.
Oh boy.
So we were just still getting to know each other, and we spent like 4 or 5 days together, just myself and Vika, because everyone else is gone. And at the end of it, she said, "Look, you know, would you come on full time? I think I like what you're doing. I think we can work well together." And long story short was, yeah, I ended up accepting her offer, and yeah, a week later, I was in Florida with her.
Wow. Holy
It
smokes.
all happened pretty quickly, yeah.
Dang. That's pretty sweet though. Holy smokes. That moved fast. Wow.
Really fast, really fast.
Jeez.
Um, and in the end of the day, the best decision ever. And it's one of, I mean, sometimes you just got, and had a great job. I was comfortable. I was in my hometown,
Hmm.
just married. And I mean, it was a pretty selfish decision. And a lot of, if you want to be successful in sports physical therapy, you have to be somewhat selfish.
Hmm.
Luckily, my partner, my wife was, very supportive. And at the end of the day, professional, particularly tennis, you see staff rotate around like physical therapists get sacked all the time, fitness trainers, coaches. So it was a big risk. But
Hmm.
in the end of the day, it was a beautiful experience, and it's led to me having my current role, which I'm back home in Australia. So yeah, I'm very very happy I jumped in with both feet.
Dude, that's awesome. I'm so jealous, but that's a cool backstory. I'm like, holy smokes. Holy
Yeah, very
smokes.
very very fortunate. Very fortunate.
Wow. So through like your travels and what you've kind of seen, I know when you and I were at Notre Dame, in particular, we talked about like maybe some differences in like how particular surgeries are performed. Like I know we discussed like the ACL at length, I think,
Hmm.
that I can recall.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, that was before all the Guinnesses.
Yeah, I know. Um, so now that you're kind of back in Australia and you're kind of overseeing all of these, so from a physical therapist compared to like a maybe like a director's position, like how has your responsibilities changed since then?
They haven't changed a great deal, to be honest. I'm still
Mhm.
very much hands on, still on the tools quite a bit.
Okay.
I suppose it's just having a bit more of awareness, and kind of when it comes to any kind of management position or whatever. I mean, I just
Mhm.
think, what have I really enjoyed as a person, as a physical therapist?
Mhm.
Um, you know, support, upskilling PD, and as we said before about just talking to people. I mean, I love now being back in tennis in a team environment.
Hmm.
It's funny when I was with Vika, it was really cool to have all that trust in her because there was no doctor, there was no other physical therapist. It was just me. I mean,
Yeah.
basically whatever I said went. I mean, it was really uplifting for her to have that trust in me.
Hmm.
But I felt the pressure to be on my game as far as upskilling, and like you said, because if you don't have the answer, I mean, you got to go find it.
Yeah.
You can't just rest on that. And now being back in a team environment, I love just informal professional development chats, with people, people in our small team, and you'll be surprised what you pick up, and also what you're able to share in those environments. So probably the one difference now is not really the role; it's just being in that team environment where you can incidentally have that continual, kind of coffee room discussions when it comes to anything, either tennis or injury or performance related.
Hmm. Wow. So with the role that you're kind of in now and the way that you kind of when you first started practicing, right? So when you first came
Mm.
out as a physio,
Yep.
um, to now as where you are now in your established position, um, what would you tell yourself, knowing like all the decisions that you've made and where you've kind of made it to now, if you had to talk to your younger self, what would you tell them? I'm really curious.
I mean, I suppose in many ways I'm very lucky that I was very, very certain of what I wanted to do in life. Like I always wanted to be a physical therapist. I always wanted to work in sports, and
Hmm.
I don't know why. I was very, very clear. Um, I suppose I always had the mindset of Alan, forest through the trees. You know, good things happen to good people.
Hmm.
And I was very fortunate where I was patient, and I always made sure I was working with a team sport on the weekends.
Hmm.
I love it when I was playing football myself, and when I stopped playing, I was always at a club, so I was always involved in team sports. And if I was to go back and say, look, that's well done, because I often get asked now from people, oh, you're so lucky. How do you get there? How do you do what you do?
Hmm.
And I'll say, yeah, I'm very, very fortunate. You know, what are you doing on your weekends? What are you doing to upskill? And the amount of people that will say, oh, I don't volunteer, or I don't work in sports.
Hmm.
If you're not working at the amateur level, volunteering your time to get better, you're not gonna not gonna likely end up in the elite environment, because if I was interviewing someone, for example,
Hmm.
particularly if it was to work under me or in our team, we can always help you upskill as far as being a better physical therapist. I often look at, what are you doing now to get better? So you could be lesser skilled or less experienced in time out of college. But if
Hmm.
you're telling me, yeah, I'm volunteering on Saturdays for this, versus someone that's not, who's been out for 4 or 5 years longer, I'd
Hmm.
rather the person that wants to shoot for the stars, because we can always help upskill you. And like many things, my job sounds like a dream, and it is, but you have to take the good with the bad. I mean,
Hmm.
traveling's great, but it's a lot of time away from your friends and your family, and everyone's personality is either from here to there and everywhere in the middle. You have to have the personality that I'm okay with having some time away from my friends and family, and
Hmm.
see the forest through trees. I'm doing something I love, and I'm contributing to sports. I've had a few interesting comments with people will I'm away too much, or
Hmm.
something like that, and pretty ruthless. I mean, if you complain because you're too away too much, go work in a private practice. Don't be here. Oh, you're traveling the world. You don't have to be here. You applied for the job.
Yeah.
So whether it's saying it to myself, or to someone else, just
Hmm.
try your very, very best to see the forest through the trees. And if you're not really sure what to expect, just speak to someone who's in the role,
Hmm.
because it's a real shame when someone works really hard to get to a particular position, and then they have the whole, "Right, this isn't what I thought." I mean, that's a real shame because there's a lot of time, a lot of energy, a lot of money, a lot of study to get somewhere to think, "Oh, I didn't know it was going to be like this."
Yeah.
So my advice to anyone younger would be try and find out. Have a think about what you really want and what you value in life.
Hmm.
Because if you are someone that gets homesick, trust me, don't work in professional tennis. I
Yeah.
mean, you're away too much, and yeah, you might be in Paris, you might be at Wimbledon, the US Open in New York, but you're still away for a long time. If
Hmm.
you are someone that needs to be home, do not work in tennis.
Yeah, that's a lot of.
Um, yeah, that's a lot for me. I mean, it's easy. Doesn't mean I don't love my wife. Doesn't mean I don't love Australia, but I love my job and we make it work.
Mhm.
But it's not for everyone.
Makes sense. Now, are you still
Yeah,
coming to Cincinnati? Um,
I'll be there, my man. I'll be there.
nice. When is that again? That's
I think from memory, early September. It's the week before the US Open. So that's a really nice lead-in tournament because that's you got the men and the women there, the ATP and the WTA. So that's a really solid um, lead into that.
nice. That'll be a lot of fun.
I expect to see you there.
I'll have to make it work. Game on, man. Uh, no, you bring up a very good point. So, like, in terms of like developing clinicians, and you were just talking about, if you want to get into sport, if you did have someone who wanted to get into like the sports world, they, they've done their shadowing, that what would be like some maybe like top three like things that you would like, this is an absolute, like you need to look into this. Obviously, like shadowing the role is one. So like that's a good point to
Mhm.
make. Maybe training wise, what would be some things for people like you went through the ACU for like the high performance sport? Is that a necessity? Is that not a necessity? Did it really help you? Or to just kind of give you that comfort level working with athletes?
Yeah, I think the really important thing is to ask yourself, do I want to work in sports and
Hmm.
I will jump at any job that anyone throws at me? Or do I want to work in a field based sport? Do I want to work in a racket sport, for example? So
Hmm.
if you're hell bent on working in tennis, you're not going to see too many ACLs. You're going to see zero contact injuries. You're
Hmm.
going to see very, very, very small muscle tears, a very small percentage. I haven't treated a single hamstring yet. They don't have high speed running. Like they don't run far enough to hurt their hamstrings. I mean, I touch wood, haven't seen a single hamstring. So if you wanted to work in tennis, okay, what's likely to get injured? Wrist number one, grumbly shoulder, low back, and we've got some really terrific leaders in the field in Australia. For example, if you're looking like a shoulder, you
Hmm.
might do like some Lynn Watson specific shoulder courses because we get a lot of micro instabilities in the shoulder, which are terrible for tennis players.
Hmm.
You'd have to really upskill and be very comfortable around the wrist, so very sport specific.
Hmm.
And there is just always a way to get into the sport that you want at some junior level because there is just never enough physical therapists or physios at the lower level because there's no funding and it's a time commitment. So I would say you just have to jump in there and you have to do the dirty work early, which won't pay a lot. It'll be weekends, but yeah, find out what skill sets you need with the body areas and just jump in and just do it. And you'd be surprised how quickly things can evolve from that.
No, that's a good point. Become a student of the sport.
100%. It's that simple.
It's awesome. See, this is why I wanted to bring you on, Alan. I wanted to bring you on. Good little clinical pearls, good little things for developing clinicians. Um, so you've had experience with a variety of different sports outside of tennis. So like cricket being one,
Mhm.
you saw Australian rules football.
Yeah.
Uh, have you had any experience with the rugby team or rugby or anything like that?
Not rugby, no.
Not rugby.
No.
Shoot. I was going to launch some rugby questions at you, but I guess not.
You can still launch them. I can do my best to try and answer, but no, not any specific rugby. No.
Nah, that's all right. Um, I guess when you have not now that you're in your more of like an overarch, you work with the entire Australian team. Um, how have you guys gone about like kind of tailoring and critiquing plans for the individuals that you have, as opposed
Mm.
to like sometimes people like I've seen will do like this a global program or base plan for everybody just to kind of
Mm.
follow.
Mate, that is just the best question anyone could ever ask.
Mhm.
And in tennis, I mean, this is just a stupid sport. I mean, as far as in any one time, I could have players that I work with that
Mhm.
you could literally have one in Paris play indoor hard court, one in Japan, one in the US, and
Mhm.
you actually might have a smaller ITF tournament in Australia.
Mhm.
So one of the biggest hurdles. One of our players had a pubic bone stress injury at the tail end of last year. So the short story was I worked with him close to every day for 3 months. It was Melbourne based athlete, and as an example, I haven't seen him for 12 weeks probably now because we rehab and got him back playing, and he goes there, and I might have to travel there, and so what you do get really good at doing, and you just have to, is the planning and the checking, and a lot of it is done electronically. And the thing with tennis players is, I mean, I suppose like any other sport, but you really do see drastic changes in body size, body type, and just individual strengths. I mean, some tennis players just move beautifully,
Mhm.
and some of the best players in the world don't move well at all.
Yeah.
I won't throw up any names. I don't need to, but they know the game. The hand-eye coordination, technical, tactical, tennis specifics, awesome,
Mhm.
unreal. But you get them to move, and they actually don't move very well. So some of them are probably a little bit thinner than you like. Some of them, a little bit on the heavier side. So as far as the kind of recipe and the templates, one thing I will say is, in general, they don't work. But in tennis, they definitely don't work. It's really hard to get some baseline measures because we don't have access to the players in Australia enough. As far as if you're not injured, because you're basically in Australia through the Australian swing, which is
Mhm.
basically December, January, February. The only other time you're back in Australia is if you're injured.
Oh, wow.
Like if you're not injured, because in and amongst the Grand Slams and the majors,
Mhm.
you're just playing, you're just overseas, and you're just playing tournaments. So yeah, you only really tend to see the players at all the Grand Slams, and then depending on where you happen to be, if they
Mhm.
happen to be there, you might see them for 1 or 2 weeks, kind of randomly. So that
Ooh.
is the biggest obstacle with biggest challenge with my job at the moment, for sure, 100%.
Oh my gosh. That's not a lot of face-to-face time like I would have anticipated.
No, I mean at the moment we have, what is it? I think we've got 10 men in Australia in the top 100 players in the world.
Wow.
So I mean that's really solid, yeah.
It's fantastic.
But in saying that, they're kind of all over the place. So are basically responsible for all those, and this is just the men, not the women, not anyone from 100 to 200. So there's quite a lot of athletes we're responsible for, and they're just very, very rarely in the same place at the same time. So that's the biggest hurdle I have to deal with on a weekly basis.
How much coffee are you drinking?
I mean, I drink so much. I drink so much.
Holy crap. Dude, that
Um,
sounds like a lot, Alan. It sounds like a lot, a lot.
yeah, I mean it's manageable. It's good fun. I personally feel very guilty
Hmm.
if you got a player and they're fine, they're not injured enough to come home, but you're like, man, I wish I was with you right now. But
Yeah.
if you're playing in a competition or a tournament in Mexico
Hmm.
and you're the only player there, I'm like, budget wise for Australia, I can't be everywhere.
Yeah.
So, and that's the only thing is, when I was with Azarenka, man, I was there. I was at the coalface every day, and no, you can't miss anything. There's
Hmm.
nothing worse than rehabbing someone and then they have a grumble. And you're like, this is easy for me to fix. We've dealt with this before, but you're not physically there, and you just
Yeah.
feel like you let people down.
Hmm.
So you just have to get really, try and be on top of your communication all the time with your planning and your programming. Just knowing that a
Hmm.
lot of the time you don't have a lot of access to your players.
Wow. So like has your programming really evolved over time, like big time? Like from when you first started to
Mm,
now, like how much do you
mm.
think you like I know a lot of people will prescribe a lot of like foam rolling and like the soft tissue stuff. Like,
Mm,
what does your programming kind of look like right now? Like, how has it changed
yeah.
since you're more electronic now?
So with again, if we're just talking about Vika,
Mm,
and I probably when I reflect, I let myself slip a bit, but I'll be honest, I didn't plan. I didn't need to. I was with it every day.
mm,
Like I was with it every day. I did
yeah,
not need to,
yeah.
and I didn't need to necessarily ask her how she's feeling or how she's moving. I mean, I know I'm with you. I mean, every time you trained, I was there. Every time you're in the gym, I'm with you.
Hmm.
But if you haven't seen someone for a month and you touch base with them, how's everything going? Yeah, you could. I mean, that's a pretty open question, right?
Hmm.
You got to have the relationship with your players because some of them will be really specific. Some of
Hmm.
them will catastrophize. Some of them will undersell an injury. I won't tell you his name, but we had a male player recently
Hmm.
fell over, fell on an outstretched hand, a right hand player, left wrist, and I randomly reached out to him, and he's like, "Oh yeah, going well." Fell on my wrist, a bit sore, and because I knew his personality, he's a real workhorse. Mentally, he's really tough. He's a beautiful person, beautiful athlete. The short of it was, he fractured his scaphoid. And he was, yeah, I promise you. So he played 3 matches with it on clay.
Oh my God.
He wasn't hitting backhands. He was just slicing. I was like, and what are you doing? Like, so the short of it was he ended up coming home.
Uh-huh.
It was had a CT scan. It was actually worse than we thought because it actually had separated and he had surgery. This happened last week. So but when I spoke to him, how is that all going? Yeah, not too bad. And it was only on my follow up questions about his body because we were managing a right patella tendinopathy.
Hmm.
It was only after pushing and prodding a bit, he's just told me about his wrist. I'm thinking, like, if I hadn't pushed and prodded with him, that particular person, I might not have known about it.
Yeah.
And he might have still been over there just hoping it was going to settle. Yeah, we've had to get him back, surgery. So great result. He's
Wow.
mending really, really well. So
Goodness.
depending on the player, you got to you have to know who to push and who not to push because same thing as everyday people. The spectrum of personalities that we deal with is quite vast.
You're like a PT tennis dad.
Yeah, I'm not correct. We do what we can.
Holy smokes. So oh my gosh. Jeez and Pete. And you
Man,
play.
lots of stories like that. Lots of stories like that. And the thing that's specific to tennis is that there's no contracts.
Mhm.
Like, man, if you're not if you're not winning, you're not earning points, and if you're not winning, you're not getting paid.
Wow.
Like, if you have an injury and you come back here for 2 months or whatever, you're not getting paid. I mean, yes, the really good players might have racket deals or apparel deals,
Hmm.
but if you're probably the 100th best in the world, which is a ridiculous effort and a massive sport, you're a very, very, very good player.
Hmm.
But if you have a 3 month injury, which is very, very, very rare, but if you do, you're not getting paid. If you've just got a grumbly shoulder that just won't go away, you're playing because you need the points and you
Yeah.
need cash. And that's what I really like about my job. One of the favorite things about my job is
Hmm.
trying to get people with injuries and niggles to keep playing. Because in order to rule someone out and say, no, you're injured, you can't play, that's junior physio, that's new grad stuff.
Hmm.
I love getting confronted with a challenge of, yes, it's sore, but I need to keep playing. And
Hmm.
that's when I rub my hands together and go, okay, let's do this. What do we need to do? But when you do get them back playing and they're pretty happy,
Hmm.
then you lose control because you don't see them for a month.
True.
And we come back to the same position and you speak to them every day, but it's beautiful when you have your hands on someone.
Yeah.
You know, one, are you doing your exercises, but how are you doing them? Yeah, are you doing them in front of a mirror? Are you getting carried away? Are you losing form because now you're doing too heavy? All those, physio 101 questions. And that's why I just much rather being with the person, with them themselves. But yeah, the program and the communication, I feel It's something we can all get better at, but I'm getting better and better and better all the time. Basically, just because I have to. There's no other option.
Yeah, evolving technology. Holy
Mm,
smokes.
mm,
I feel like, man, I mean, in the day and age when like technology is so big and like you
mm.
have, I mean, how could you leverage different progressions? Like, I mean, obviously you and I are talking from different hemispheres.
Yep, yep, correct. Yes,
Zoom is a wonderful thing. Thank you, Zoom.
yes.
Um, I'd be kind of curious to see maybe what kind, like, do you guys use a specific programming platform, or is it something you guys just like, you write up, you email, like, or is it something in particular you guys use?
So as far as we use AMS, so we've got our own athlete management system.
Okay.
Yeah. Um, but to be honest, with Tennis Australia, we have shared files and shared folders that we can use. A
Mhm.
lot of what I do goes on AMS, so we can keep track of what we're doing. But a lot of my personal programming is just with the players.
Okay.
Um, some of the players, most of the pro players have their own fitness trainer or strength and conditioning coach. The
Mm.
ones that do, I'll speak to them.
Okay.
Not all of them do. But a lot of it is just between myself and the player or myself and their coach. And then I'll medico legally transfer that to the AMS as need be.
Wow. That's pretty sweet setup though. I mean, I feel like
Mm,
the epitome we talk about the sports medicine model, but like this is kind of cool to like hear about it in work. Like that's nice
mm.
to see. Um,
Certainly in team sports, it's so much more structured.
mhm.
So much. It's easier. It's structured. It's by the book. But yeah, in this world, yeah, a lot of it is ad hoc. Thinking on your feet. How in tune the player is with their body. Do they have a good strength coach? But again, you just don't have the access to the players, and you're restricted to phone conversations. And a lot of the time, it's like myself and you. They're
Mhm.
waking up. I'm going to bed. So a lot of the time, unless one of you guys are really put out, you don't really, even with the cameras or Zoom chats or WhatsApp, you don't often
Mhm.
see them in the gym doing their exercises. It's more just touching base with how they are going as a whole.
Hmm. Have you ever had any like conflicts with the coaches or the strength coaches with like what you want to do versus what they're trying to do? Like, have you ever had any instances like that?
No, I mean it's certainly not with Tennis Australia. Um, very very fortunate. I feel like the players and the strength coaches appreciate all the input you do have.
Good.
I mean, when I really do self reflect, I think one of my strengths is my ability to just offer suggestions. I will never tell anyone what to do. You have to sell to them why I think it'd be beneficial for you to do this. But I'll always go back to the strength coach. This is your program. This is your athlete. What do you need from me? And it's human nature is quite interesting, and I find that the sometimes the more you leave it to someone and you say, "I'm here if you need me. Let me know when you need me." The less you push, the more people are willing to receive what you're trying to say.
Yeah.
If you say, "Mate, you need to do this, this, and this," I mean, it's funny. Sometimes you get a bit of a roadblock, but I mean, life, particularly sports physio, in my experience, just comes down to communications. And so far, so lucky that I'm very fortunate that I deal with a lot of great coaches, great strength coaches, but awesome people. So very, very fortunate because people skills, in my opinion, definitely come first.
I'm starting to see a big trend with a lot of the people that I've had on interviews here lately, where communication, like first and foremost, is like the epitome of the pyramid of like how you're going to be working with people. And I think that sometimes gets lost, especially in school. Like everyone wants to sit here and know, like, I have the best ACL return to sport protocol, or I have this for like, training, and it's like the greatest thing ever. But then they can't hold a conversation,
Yeah.
which that's really hard to get any kind of information across if you can't even talk to the person. Um,
Yeah.
so have you ever had any of your clinicians who like work with you? How have you gone about coaching them to maybe build or improve their communication skills?
It's a good question. I think in general,
Hmm.
Funnily enough, I read a quote the other day. Some Greek philosopher, I forget his name, and he said, you got two ears and you've got one mouth for a reason. You got to listen more, try and listen more than you talk,
Hmm.
and it depends on. I've got certain colleagues that I work with that I can give it to them straight between the eyes. Something that no, that's not right. And I love having those relationships, but I really like the relationships where you don't know someone super well, or you do know them super well, and you have to put some fairy bread around it. You have to soften it. I like to ask a lot of questions.
Hmm.
Um, you know, why? And sometimes I'll put myself in the gun as far as why did you do that? Because I don't do that. I'm not. Tell me why you think that works. I'm intrigued because if you can sell me, I'll do it.
Hmm.
And if someone can't give you the solid evidence based reasoning of what they're trying to achieve, or they
Hmm.
can't reason it, I'm happy to challenge that. But not as far as you should be doing this. I say I do it this way because of A, B, and C. I could be wrong. Why do you do your way? Because it might be better. But if they
Hmm.
can't explain why they're doing something, it opens up a really good conversation. But it always, in my opinion, I like to ask why they're doing something,
Hmm.
because we all fall into traps of we do the same thing because we always have. It's like driving a car.
Hmm.
I'm sure if I set a driver's license tomorrow for my license, I would probably fail because I'm so confident in a car. I've driven for a long time now. You probably don't check your blind spot when you should. You probably don't indicate for long enough. You're just so
Hmm.
confident. You're just on autopilot. Sometimes I get to work and I'm like, how did I get here? It just happens. So if you're not careful, and if you don't have a good team around you asking why you're doing certain things, it's easy to fall into the trap of just because.
Yeah.
And so I mean, I don't know if I've answered the question at all, but yeah, a lot of listening and a lot of asking questions of people, and I love it when people say it to me. And sometimes you will say, "Look, I do it for this reason. What do you got for me? Happy to try something different."
Hmm.
And yeah, you kind of piece it together.
That's awesome.
Mm.
Now, do you ever have any instances where that person just does not take to that information and they like, no matter what you've done to help them, they just keep doing the same thing, or they don't have like just the lack of communication skills?
In my experience, when it comes to physical therapy related injury type stuff, it's not so much because you can come back to your clinical reasoning, you can come back to evidence based. Where we sometimes fall down is where you get, the physical therapists, and they kind of go outside their lane a little bit, and they try and put their nose into the coaching realm. And I've seen some coaches be pretty upset where people like myself start offering, and it's a slippery slope.
Hmm.
Um, I would never ever make any technical changes with a tennis player
Hmm.
because I never played tennis, let alone professional tennis. What I've come to realize that, again, in my opinion, if you've got like a slight technical flaw, sometimes that's what makes you special in sports specific. So
Hmm.
when we're in cricket, for example, you talk about lumbar stress fractures. That was our biggest thing because if you do have lumbar stress fractures, you're out for a minimum 6 months. But sometimes, if you've got a bit of a funky action, if you kind of correct that to try and reduce the likelihood of getting injured, you might take a yard off of their pace, or they might not swing the ball as much. So sometimes those little funky things that can predispose someone to injury are sometimes what make them special as an athlete.
Hmm.
So you have to be really careful with your conversations with coaches with an injured player.
Hmm.
But at no stage would I ever try and make technical changes unless asked by a coach. So, a few of the times I have seen physical therapists butt heads with anyone, it's
Hmm.
normally with the coach when they're kind of suggesting some technical aspects should be changed because you put if you think about it from the coach's point of view, and put their lens on, put their hat on,
Hmm.
that can be really tough if you hit them without asking them about it first. So that's there. Again, I'm not sure if I asked the question, but it would be more to do with the coach physical therapist relationship, where some problems can come about.
Okay. No, that's a great answer, Alan.
Mm.
Uh, how have you gone about balancing, longevity of play versus what makes them special, makes them really dangerous or effective on the court? Like,
Mm.
what's the fair balance between like, yeah, this could predispose you, but at the same time, like this does make you really competitive as a player versus
Mm.
you might only play a year potentially versus,
Mm.
you'll have a 10-year career kind of a thing. I'm
Yeah.
not too familiar with like what's the average career for a tennis player. So I'm just kind of curious, like longevity versus, the flash in the pan, good for a little minute.
Yeah, that's such a good question, and it's basically impossible to answer because it really
Hmm.
is, you know, based from one person to the next to the next,
Hmm.
and again, one of the unique things about tennis, like if you're playing NFL football, NHL hockey, whatever, basically at the end of the day, you lose your contract and you stop being a pro player.
Hmm.
With tennis, I mean, I think technically you could be in the top 1,000 players in the world, and technically, I suppose you're a pro player. If your parents are really wealthy, for example, let's just say money's not an issue, you can play lower tournaments, but you can travel around the world for the entire year and play lower level tournaments, like
Hmm.
ITF tournaments. So when you say, I mean, very few players retire from injuries,
Hmm.
and if they do, they're in the early 30s at the earliest. So when players stop playing pro, it's normally when they get to a stage where it's just costing them too much money traveling around, and they're not winning enough to support their lifestyle. And it's really ruthless. It comes down to, I can't afford to be a pro player anymore because I'm making X and it's costing me X plus whatever it is to travel, pay for food, pay for accommodation. So that's why tennis is, again, we've gone on a bit of a tangent. That's why tennis is
Hmm.
such a unique sport as well, because you don't have
Hmm.
contracts. Like Tennis Australia don't pay their players,
I didn't know that.
and that's why it becomes really challenging. That's why players always want to play. Um,
Hmm.
but yeah, going back to what you did say about, if I saw something that was really funky, I would always chat to a coach about how important is it for that player to maintain that motor pattern. And generally, with a good coach, you're on the same page.
Hmm.
But I mean, as much as me, it's really hard to break habits. To that implicit learning. If you've been doing something for a good few years, and if you haven't picked up a tennis racket by the age of 6, I mean, you're probably not going to make it. I mean, all of the tennis players that I know that are pro players now,
Hmm.
they don't start when they're 12. They have been playing, particularly the Eastern Europeans. Um, they're picked up a racket when they're 4 years old.
Wow.
So by the time they get half decent and looked at as a 14-year-old, let alone an 18-year-old,
Hmm.
um, yeah, it can best case scenario, it can be pretty hard to to unwire some of these ingrained implicit learning strategies.
Holy smokes. I think
Mm.
the four, I'm not gonna lie, the 4 years old part kind of caught me off guard.
Oh, and that's not. I mean, that's just what happens. I mean, in tennis, it's one of those sports that you have to start
Mhm.
early. I mean, I'll be in at work and you'll see the 8, 9, 10, 11 year olds, some of the really good state players, and you see them in there all the time, hitting balls all the time and in the gym, and it being an individual sport. And you get some pretty crazy tennis parents, don't worry, but I mean, you see the investment from a time perspective from the parents. It's probably
Mhm.
similar to swimming. I mean, swimming is an awful sport because it's a lot, and tennis, yeah, it really is. Like they start really young.
Mhm.
So we're pretty lucky in Australia, and the USTA would be the same. You have good junior coaches, so you kind of hope by the time they come up, they have good advice, some good strength and conditioning within reason, so that they're not so fragile. and technically, tactically, they're quite good. Depending where you are in the world, you're not going to have the support that our junior athletes have in Australia. That's for sure. That could get very tough.
Even beats, man. It's
Mm.
it's kind of crazy, more so than what I would have ever anticipated.
And it is honestly a brutal sport. It's a brutal sport, and I mean, think of it. It's similar. I mean, to golf. I mean, if you are having a bad day, like you cannot hide anywhere.
Yeah.
Like even if you're playing basketball and there's only five, you've got four teammates, you can still hide. You can still get subbed. Like in
Mhm.
tennis, you cannot hide anywhere. So you got to be on the whole time, and that starts from a pretty early age.
Gee, and Bates, man.
Hmm.
Hmm. Now, so you said you had, do you play tennis or have you played tennis?
No, I played football and cricket basically. Yeah, so
Okay.
never played tennis myself.
Wow. Well, so if you had an opportunity to go back to when you were younger, would you have played the sports
Mm,
you played or would you have picked up tennis instead?
no, that's a good question. I was always fairly athletic as a kid,
Hmm.
um, and I would love to try tennis. Um, if I could go back in time, I think I would play probably tennis, and football, Australian rules football. I still love cricket, but I wonder whether I might have been any good at tennis because a lot of aspects of it are pretty cool. I like the ownership, I like the athleticism.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, so it's a good question. I think stuff it. If I could go back in time, I definitely think I would have played tennis.
Nice, man. Dang.
Yeah, it's a cool sport. Tough, but very very cool.
Hmm. Alan, I know it's pretty late there for you, so I'll wrap things up here because that way you can go get some sleep. But no, man,
No, easy peasy.
thank you so much for joining me today, Alan. I really enjoyed catching up with you again, man. We need to do this more often.
Oh, mate, we do. It was really good fun. Yeah, thank you, technology. But no, any time, my friend. We need to do it more.
I agree. No, but so for all the listeners out there, thank you again for tuning in, and we will see you guys in the next episode.